Nobody wakes up one day and suddenly looks or feels older. The process is quieter than that, slower than that, and considerably more ordinary than that. It happens through the things you do every single day, the habits so normal, so woven into the fabric of daily life that they never register as harmful. The way you sit, the way you breathe, when you eat, whether you drink enough water. None of these things feel like they are doing anything significant. But repeated across months and years, these small, ordinary habits quietly accumulate into something that shows up in how you feel, how you look, how well your brain works, and how fast your body ages. Here are some habits that most people do every single day, most of which feel completely neutral or even comfortable, and all of which are, slowly and quietly, adding years to how your body feels and functions. Subscribe to Freud Mind and let us get into it. Start with stress, the low-grade, constant, background stress that most people have simply accepted as a normal feature of modern life. The kind that is not intense enough to feel like an emergency, but never fully goes away either. Your body has a stress response system that was designed for short, sharp threats. A predator, a physical danger, an acute crisis that requires immediate action. In those contexts, the system is brilliant. It floods the body with cortisol and adrenaline, sharpens focus, redirects energy towards survival functions, and then, when the threat passes, returns to baseline. The entire sequence is designed to be brief. The stress arrives, the body responds, the threat resolves, the system rests. Modern stress does not work this way. Modern stress is not a predator that either catches you or does not. It is a meeting tomorrow, and the thing you said last Tuesday, and the notification you have not checked, and the bill at the end of the month, and the low-level ambient uncertainty of a world that never fully quiets down. None of these things resolve cleanly. None of them allow the cortisol to drop back to baseline in the way the system was designed for. So the body stays in a partial stress state, not full survival mode, but elevated, tense, running higher than it should, indefinitely. The consequences of this over time are extensive. Chronically elevated cortisol breaks down collagen, the protein that gives skin its structure and elasticity, which accelerates visible skin aging in ways that no moisturizer fully addresses. It disrupts sleep architecture, reducing the deep sleep stages that are most restorative for both the brain and the body. It impairs memory consolidation and cognitive function, contributing to the mental fog that many people normalize as just being tired. It suppresses immune function, increases systemic inflammation, and elevates the risk of cardiovascular disease. Chronic stress does not feel like aging you, but the biology is unambiguous. It is. Sleep is where the body does most of its actual repair work, and most people are either not getting enough of it, not getting it at consistent times, or getting it in a way that is regularly interrupted, and therefore less restorative than the quantity would suggest. The number of hours matters, but so does consistency. Your body operates on a circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour biological clock that regulates everything from hormone release to immune function to body temperature. This clock is exquisitely sensitive to timing. Sleeping 7 hours at a consistent time every night is significantly more restorative than sleeping 7 hours at randomly varying times, because consistency allows the circadian clock to anticipate sleep and prepare for it, initiating the hormonal cascade that makes sleep restorative rather than just unconscious. Blue light from screens before bed delays melatonin release, the hormone that signals the brain it is time to sleep, pushing back sleep onset and compressing the total sleep window even when you technically go to bed at the same time. Sleeping with the television on, which many people do habitually, fragments sleep architecture in ways that are not felt as waking but reduce sleep quality measurably. Light and sound during sleep activate the brain at a level that prevents it from reaching the deepest, most restorative stages as reliably or as frequently. Over years, chronically poor sleep does not just produce tiredness. It accelerates cellular aging, measured directly through telomere length, the protective caps on chromosomes that shorten with age and with cellular stress. Poor sleep shortens telomeres faster. The biology of aging at the cellular level is directly affected by how well and how consistently you sleep. Screen time deserves honest attention here, not because screens are inherently harmful, but because the way most people use them creates several specific problems that accumulate over time. The first is what extended screen use does to attention. The modern content environment, short videos, rapid notifications, constantly refreshing feeds, is optimized for capturing and holding attention through novelty and unpredictability. Spending extended time in this environment gradually recalibrates what the brain considers a normal level of stimulation. The prefrontal cortex, which handles sustained focus and deliberate thinking, becomes progressively less comfortable with extended, single-task engagement. Attention span does not just feel shorter, it measurably becomes shorter, because the brain adapts to the environment it is consistently placed in. The second problem is postural. Looking down at a phone for extended periods places the head in a forward-flexed position that puts significant load on the cervical spine. The human head weighs approximately 10 to 12 pounds in a neutral position. Tilting it forward at 60 degrees, which is approximately the angle most people hold for phone use, multiplies the effective load on the neck to approximately 60 pounds. Over years, this creates chronic neck and shoulder tension, rounded posture, and contributes to the kind of stiffness and postural deterioration that most people attribute simply to getting older, when it is at least partly attributable to how they have been holding their head for the past decade. The third is the notification system itself. Every notification is a micro-interruption, a small context switch that pulls attention away from whatever the brain was doing. The cumulative cognitive cost of dozens of these per day, every day, is real and measurable. The brain never achieves sustained depth in any task. The default becomes shallow, fragmented engagement with everything, and genuine depth with nothing. Sitting is probably the habit most people would rate as the most boring entry on this list, and it is also one of the most comprehensively damaging ones over time. The human body was not designed for the sitting posture as a default state. Humans evolved for continuous moderate movement, walking, carrying, squatting, climbing, and the muscular, circulatory, and metabolic systems are calibrated for a body that moves through the day rather than one that is stationary for most of it. Prolonged sitting reduces circulation to the legs and lower body, creates sustained muscular inactivity in the glutes, core, and hip flexors that leads to real functional weakness over time, and compresses the intervertebral discs of the lower spine in ways that contribute to the back pain that is now epidemic in populations that sit for work. The body does not just need exercise. It needs movement distributed throughout the day. Never using the stairs, always taking elevators, parking as close as possible, using moving walkways, avoiding any unnecessary physical effort, these individually seem like efficiency. Collectively, they strip the daily accumulation of incidental movement that the body's systems were designed to receive, leaving them understimulated in ways that accumulate into weakness, stiffness, and functional decline. Morning sunlight is something most people living modern indoor lives almost never get, and the consequences for how they feel and function throughout the day are more significant than most people realize. Your circadian clock is primarily set by light exposure, specifically by bright natural light reaching the eyes in the morning hours. This light signal triggers a cascade of hormonal events that the rest of the day's biology depends on. Cortisol peaks at the right time, serotonin production is appropriately stimulated, and, critically, the timing of melatonin release in the evening is calibrated correctly. People who go from a dark bedroom to a dim indoor environment and never see bright natural light until they step outside at noon or later are running their circadian clock on an incorrect signal. The downstream effects include worse sleep at night, lower daytime energy, mood dysregulation, and impaired cognitive performance, all of which most people attribute to other causes. 10 to 15 minutes of morning sunlight is one of the lowest effort, highest return health behaviors available. It costs nothing, requires no equipment, and supports the biological systems that almost everything else depends on. Most people do not do it, not because they have decided against it, but because they have simply never thought about it. Chronic dehydration is one of the most common and most underappreciated contributors to how people feel day to day. The majority of adults are mildly dehydrated for most of the day, not because they are not drinking at all, but because they are not drinking enough, substituting coffee, which has a mild diuretic effect, and other beverages that do not fully replace water's role in hydration. Even mild dehydration, as little as 1 to 2% below optimal hydration, produces measurable decreases in cognitive performance, concentration, and reaction time. It increases the subjective experience of fatigue, reduces physical performance, and affects skin elasticity and appearance. The brain is approximately 75% water, and it is acutely sensitive to changes in hydration status in ways that show up in cognitive function before they show up in thirst. By the time you feel thirsty, you are already meaningfully dehydrated. Thirst is a lag indicator, not a real-time one, which means using thirst as the primary guide to hydration means spending most of the day in a state of mild, cognitive, and physical underperformance. The food environment most people live in is saturated with ultra-processed foods and added sugar to a degree that has no historical precedent in human nutrition. And the biological consequences of eating in this environment are extensive and operate at multiple levels simultaneously. Blood sugar spikes from high glycemic foods create a cycle of sharp glucose rises, followed by crashes that produce fatigue, irritability, and cravings that are not easy to distinguish from genuine hunger. Over years, this pattern contributes to insulin resistance, the reduced sensitivity of cells to insulin, which is associated with weight gain, cognitive decline, and dramatically increased risk of type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. Advanced glycation end products, compounds formed when sugar molecules bind to proteins and fats in the body, are directly involved in the visible and structural aspects of aging, including skin stiffness, reduced elasticity, and accelerated cellular damage. The name says what they do. They are end products of a process that ages tissue. Breathing is one of the most unconscious of all human activities, and most people breathe in a way that is subtly but significantly suboptimal for long-term health. The dominant modern breathing pattern is chest breathing, shallow, rapid, primarily using the upper chest and accessory muscles, rather than the diaphragm. This pattern keeps the body in a mild state of physiological arousal, because shallow chest breathing is the same breathing pattern associated with the stress response. The body reads the breathing pattern as a signal about the state of the system, and shallow breathing signals mild stress even when no stressor is present. Diaphragmatic breathing, breathing that engages the belly and uses the full capacity of the lungs, activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reduces heart rate and blood pressure, and signals the body that it is safe to be in a rest and recover state. Most people almost never breathe this way during waking hours. The consequence, compounded over years, is a nervous system that is subtly more stressed than it needs to be, more reactive to stressors than it would otherwise be, and recovering less efficiently from the demands of the day. Breathing through the mouth all day is an additional specific problem. Nasal breathing filters and humidifies air, produces nitric oxide, which dilates blood vessels and improves oxygen delivery, and supports the structural development of the jaw and airway. Habitual mouth breathing bypasses all of these functions and is associated with poorer sleep quality, dental problems, and reduced oxygen efficiency. Eating too fast is a habit most people have without realizing it, and its consequences operate through basic biology that has not changed despite how much the eating environment has. The satiety signals that tell the brain the body has had enough food take approximately 20 minutes to reach their full intensity. Not because the system is slow, but because it depends on hormonal signals from the digestive process that take time to accumulate. Eating quickly means regularly consuming significantly more food than the body needs before the signal arrives, because the meal is already over before the satiety has caught up. Over years, this contributes to habitual overeating, disrupted blood sugar regulation, and digestive issues that accumulate into chronic gut problems. Loneliness is a biological state, not just an emotional one. Humans evolved in close-knit social groups where isolation was genuinely dangerous. Being separated from the group meant exposure to predators, loss of access to shared resources, and drastically reduced survival probability. The body registers social isolation as a threat in the same way it registers physical danger, activating stress responses that were useful in the ancestral context and are damaging in a modern one, where loneliness might persist, not for hours, but for months or years. Research consistently finds that chronic loneliness is associated with elevated cortisol, increased systemic inflammation, reduced immune function, accelerated cognitive decline, and significantly increased mortality risk, comparable in its health impact to smoking 15 cigarettes per day, according to one widely cited meta-analysis. Social connection is not a luxury. It is a biological requirement for the systems that maintain physical and psychological health. The modern epidemic of loneliness, driven by urbanization, remote work, social media substituting for in-person connection, and the erosion of community structures, is a genuine health crisis that operates largely invisibly. Neglecting oral health is one of those areas where the connection to overall health is stronger than most people intuitively expect. The mouth is not isolated from the rest of the body. It is an entry point into the bloodstream and the respiratory system, and chronic oral inflammation from untreated gum disease has been associated in research with increased risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes complications, and systemic inflammation. The bacteria involved in periodontal disease do not stay in the mouth. They enter circulation and trigger inflammatory responses throughout the body. Good oral hygiene is not just about teeth. It is a form of systemic health maintenance. Mobility and flexibility loss is something most people notice as they age and attribute entirely to aging itself, when a significant portion of it is actually attributable to disuse. The body maintains the range of motion it regularly uses and gradually loses the range it does not. Hips that never move through their full range of motion become hips that cannot move through their full range. Shoulders that are always in a forward hunched position develop the musculature and connective tissue adaptations that make that position, the default, and other positions increasingly difficult. The stiffness most people experience as an inevitable consequence of aging is at least partly the result of years of limited movement in limited positions. Balance is particularly important here, and particularly neglected. Balance ability declines with age, and this decline is one of the primary contributors to falls and fall-related injuries in older adults, which are among the most significant health events that determine quality of life and independence in later years. Balance, like strength and mobility, is a use-it-or-lose-it capacity. People who regularly challenge their balance maintain it far better than those who do not. The final, and perhaps most underappreciated habit on this list, is the one that ties many of the others together. Modern life has been engineered, deliberately and successfully, to remove challenge, discomfort, and effort from daily experience. Every small convenience is individually a minor improvement in daily comfort. Collectively, they have produced a lifestyle that exposes the body to almost no challenge whatsoever. No meaningful cold, no meaningful heat, no heavy lifting, no sustained walking, no genuine hunger, no boredom, no waiting, no effort, Your ancestors' bodies were constantly exposed to the small daily challenges, carrying, walking, temperature variation, physical effort, that kept their adaptive systems active and responsive. Challenge is what maintains the body's adaptations. Remove the challenge, and the adaptations gradually fade. The muscles weaken, the cardiovascular system becomes less efficient, the metabolic flexibility decreases, the stress response system becomes poorly calibrated. Bodies that are never challenged become bodies that struggle with challenge when it arrives. This is not an argument against comfort. Comfort is a genuine good, and the reduction of unnecessary suffering through modern conveniences is worth having. But there is a meaningful difference between eliminating genuine suffering and eliminating the low-level physical and cognitive challenge that the body and brain require to maintain their capacities. The habit of constant comfort, of always choosing the path of least effort, always optimizing for ease, always removing friction, is quietly eroding the physical and cognitive resources that make life functional, energetic, and capable. Here is where it all lands. Aging is not caused by one big mistake. It is not a single choice or a dramatic failure. It is the quiet accumulation of dozens of small habits, each one harmless on its own, each one invisible in the moment, and each one compounding with all the others across months and years into something that shows up in the mirror, in the doctor's office, in how you feel at 3 p.m, and in how the body responds when it is asked to do something demanding. Chronic stress, poor sleep, too much screen time, too much sitting, no morning light, too little water, too much sugar, never breathing properly, never moving fully, eating too fast, chronic loneliness, ignored oral health, lost mobility, constant comfort, shallow breathing, constant multitasking, background overthinking. None of them feel like they are doing anything. All of them are. The good news is that habits are reversible. Not instantly, not completely, but the body is remarkably responsive to change, more responsive than most people expect, and more forgiving of past neglect than the fitness industry typically implies. The changes do not have to be dramatic. They do not have to happen all at once. They just have to happen. Because the same compounding that quietly ages, you can quietly work the other direction too. Like and subscribe to Freud Mind for more.